I was halfway through installing a backup battery system in my generator shed when I heard the police sirens coming down Maple Grove Drive. And somehow, I knew they were heading straight for my driveway in Sterling Heights, Michigan. I wiped the grease off my hands and stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, squinting as two patrol cars pulled up in front of my house. My heart sank. This had to be about the HOA. It was always about the HOA these days. Officer Martinez stepped out first, a stocky guy in his 40s with kind eyes that seemed apologetic already. His partner, Officer Chen, looked younger and more by the book. They approached my driveway where I stood next to my generator shed, a solid 12 by 16-foot structure I had built 3 years ago. "Good afternoon, sir. Are you Ryan Henderson?" Martinez asked. "That's me. What's this about, officers?" Chen consulted his notepad. "We received a complaint about an unpermitted structure on your property. A generator shed." He gestured to the building beside me. I felt my jaw tighten. "You've got to be kidding me. This shed has been here for 3 years. It's fully permitted." Martinez held up a hand. "We're just responding to the complaint, sir. Do you have documentation showing the permit?" "Of course I do. Come inside. I'll show you everything." As we walked toward my front door, I saw her. Sharon Kimball, the HOA president, standing on her lawn 3 houses down with her arms crossed, and that smug expression she always wore. She was watching us like a hawk, probably thrilled that she had actually gotten the police to show up. Sharon was in her late 40s, always dressed like she was about to attend a country club meeting, and had made my life a living nightmare for the past 6 months. Inside my house, I pulled out my filing cabinet and retrieved the folder containing all my building permits. My hands shook slightly, not from fear but from sheer frustration. I had done everything right, everything by the book, and yet here I was, having to prove my innocence to the police. "Here," I said, spreading the documents on my kitchen table. "Building permit approved by Sterling Heights City Planning on March 15th, 3 years ago. Inspection certificate dated April 23rd that same year. All signed, all approved." Martinez studied the documents carefully while Chen took photos with his phone. "These look legitimate," Martinez said. "Mind if I verify these with the city? Please do. I've got nothing to hide." While Martinez stepped outside to make the call, Chen stayed with me. "HOA dispute?" he asked, almost sympathetically. "You have no idea. Sharon Kimball has been on my case since she became president 6 months ago. Before that, nobody cared about my shed. It's been sitting there, minding its own business for 3 years. Suddenly, she decides it's an eyesore and needs to go." Chen nodded. "We get a lot of calls like this." "HOA disputes are more common than you'd think." Martinez returned a few minutes later. "City confirms the permit is valid and the structure passed all inspections. You're completely in the clear, Mr. Henderson." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by anger. "So what happens now?" "Can you talk to Sharon and tell her to leave me alone?" "We can have a conversation with her," Martinez said. "But HOA matters are generally civil issues. If she continues to harass you, you might want to consider legal action." After the officers left, I watched through my window as they walked over to Sharon's house. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see Sharon's animated gestures and the officer's professional but firm body language. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes before the officers got back in their cars and drove away. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA. Inside was a formal violation notice claiming my generator shed violated the community's architectural guidelines. The fine was $500, with an additional $100 per day, until the structure was removed or brought into compliance. I read the letter 3 times, my blood pressure rising with each pass. The architectural guidelines they cited were dated from 18 months ago, a year and a half after my shed was built. They were trying to apply new rules retroactively. I immediately called my neighbor, Frank Morrison, who had been on the HOA board before Sharon took over. Frank was in his 60s, retired from the auto industry, and one of the most reasonable people I had ever met. "Ryan, I heard about the police visit," Frank said when he answered. "Sharon's been bragging about it at the community center. Frank, they're fining me $500 plus $100 a day for a shed that was legally permitted 3 years ago. That's not right. The architectural guidelines we implemented can't be applied retroactively. That was specifically discussed when we voted on them. Sharon knows that. So what do I do? First, don't pay the fine. Second, request a hearing with the HOA board. You have that right according to our bylaws. Third, start documenting everything. Every interaction, every letter, every conversation. If this goes to court, you'll need a paper trail." I took Frank's advice. That evening, I drafted a formal response to the HOA, disputing the violation and requesting a hearing. I attached copies of my building permits, inspection certificates, and a detailed timeline showing that my shed predated their architectural guidelines by more than a year. The next morning, I dropped the letter in Sharon's mailbox personally. As I walked back to my house, she emerged from her front door. "Ryan, we need to talk about your compliance with HOA regulations," she called out. I turned to face her. "Sharon, I've submitted my response in writing. I'll see you at the hearing." There doesn't need to be a hearing if you just admit you're in violation and remove the structure. The structure is permitted and legal. I'm not removing anything. Her face flushed red. This is exactly the kind of attitude that makes neighborhoods fall apart. Rules exist for a reason. Everyone else manages to follow them. I did follow them. I got permits, I passed inspections. What more do you want? The shed is ugly and it brings down property values. Several neighbors have complained. Which neighbors? I'd like to hear from them directly. Sharon's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That information is confidential, convenient, so you can claim people are complaining without having to prove it. I don't have to prove anything to you. The HOA board has voted and the decision stands. Then I'll see you at the hearing. I walked back to my house, my hands clenched into fists. This wasn't about property values or architectural guidelines. This was about control. Sharon had found someone who wouldn't immediately bow to her authority, and she had made it her mission to break me. Over the next week, things escalated. Sharon began driving past my house multiple times a day, slowing down to take pictures of my shed from different angles. She started posting in the neighborhood Facebook group about the importance of maintaining community standards, with thinly veiled references to my situation. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at the community center. I spent the weekend preparing my presentation, printing out enlarged copies of my permits, and researching HOA law in Michigan. What I discovered was eye-opening. Michigan law was very specific about HOA powers and limitations. HOAs could not enforce rules retroactively. They could not impose fines without proper notice and an opportunity for the homeowner to be heard. And they certainly could not demand the removal of legally permitted structures. Tuesday evening arrived, and I walked into the community center conference room with a folder full of documents and a laptop loaded with supporting information. The HOA board sat at a table at the front, Sharon in the center, flanked by 2 other board members I recognized but didn't know well. One was Linda Patterson, a quiet woman in her 50s who always seemed uncomfortable in Sharon's presence. The other was Gary Webster, a younger guy in his 30s who had recently bought into the neighborhood and seemed eager to impress Sharon. About 15 other residents sat in folding chairs, including Frank, who gave me an encouraging nod. Sharon called the meeting to order with an air of formality that felt rehearsed. "We're here tonight to address the violation at 1847 Maple Grove Drive, the residence of Ryan Henderson. Mr. Henderson has erected an unpermitted structure that violates our architectural guidelines." "May I present my defense?" I asked. Sharon looked annoyed. "You'll have an opportunity to speak." "With all due respect, this is my hearing. I'd like to speak now." Linda Patterson spoke up quietly. "Sharon, let him present his case. That's why we're here." Sharon's jaw tightened, but she gestured for me to proceed. I stood and connected my laptop to the projector I had brought. "Thank you. First, let's establish the facts. On March 15th, 3 years ago, I applied for and received a building permit from the city of Sterling Heights for a 12 by 16-foot generator shed. I displayed the permit on the screen. On April 23rd that same year, the structure passed all required inspections. I showed the inspection certificate. The HOA architectural guidelines you're citing were adopted 18 months ago, as shown in the meeting minutes from that date. I displayed those next. This shed was built and approved more than a year before those guidelines existed. Under Michigan HOA law, specifically the Condominium Act and relevant case law, associations cannot apply rules retroactively. I could see some of the residents nodding. Sharon's face was getting redder. "Furthermore," I continued, "Michigan law requires HOAs to act reasonably and in good faith. Attempting to force the removal of a legally permitted structure that has existed for 3 years, without any objective evidence of harm, is neither reasonable nor in good faith." Gary Webster spoke up. "But the guidelines say all structures require HOA approval." "They do," I agreed. "Guidelines that were adopted 18 months ago. My shed is 3 years old. The timeline is clear and documented." Sharon leaned forward. "Several neighbors have complained about the appearance of your shed." "Which neighbors? I'd like to hear their complaints directly." "As I told you before, that's confidential." "Actually, it's not," Frank said from the audience. "Our bylaws require that complaints be documented and made available to the homeowner in question. Ryan has a right to face his accusers." Sharon shot Frank a look that could have melted steel. "This isn't a criminal trial, Frank." "No, but it is a formal hearing and our bylaws are clear. I helped write them, remember." The room fell silent. Linda Patterson looked at Sharon. "He's right. If there are formal complaints, they should be part of the record." Sharon shuffled through her papers. "I have notes from conversations." "Notes aren't formal complaints," Frank said. "And having lived here longer than most people in this room, I can tell you that nobody complained about Ryan's shed until you became president 6 months ago." "That's out of order," Sharon snapped. "It's the truth," another resident called out. I recognized him as Tom Chen, who lived 2 doors down from me. "I walk past Ryan's house every day. The shed is neat, well-maintained, and you can barely see it from the street because of the fence." "Nobody cares except you, Sharon." Other residents began murmuring in agreement. Sharon's face was now crimson. "This hearing is about following rules," Sharon said, her voice rising. "If we let one person break the rules, everyone will think they can." "But I didn't break any rules," I said firmly. "I followed every rule that existed at the time. You're trying to create a violation where none exists." Linda Patterson spoke again. "Sharon, I think we need to reconsider this. The facts are pretty clear." "I second that," said a man I didn't know from the back of the room. Sharon looked like she was about to explode. "Fine. The board will take this under advisement and vote in closed session. This hearing is adjourned." She slammed her gavel and stormed out of the conference room. Linda and Gary followed, though Linda gave me an apologetic look. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to congratulate me and express their frustration with Sharon's leadership. Frank clapped me on the shoulder. "That went better than I expected," he said, "but be careful. Sharon doesn't like to lose." He was right to warn me. 3 days later, I woke up to find that someone had spray painted "Remove the Shed" on my driveway in bright red paint. I immediately called the police and filed a report. Officer Martinez came out to take photos and gather evidence. "Any idea who might have done this?" he asked. "I have suspicions, but no proof." Martinez nodded knowingly. "The HOA situation." "Yeah. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Henderson. Unless we have video evidence or witnesses, vandalism cases like this are hard to solve." "Do you have any security cameras?" "Not yet, but I'm installing them today." I spent that afternoon installing a complete security camera system around my property. 8 cameras covering every angle with motion detection and cloud backup. If something else happened, I would have evidence. That night, I received an email from the HOA. The board had voted 2-1 to uphold the violation and the associated fines. I now supposedly owed $500 plus an additional $800 for the 8 days since the original notice. The email also stated that if I didn't pay within 30 days, they would place a lien on my property. Linda Patterson had clearly been the dissenting vote. I appreciated her integrity, but 2 votes was enough for Sharon to get her way. I forwarded the email to the lawyer I had consulted earlier that week. Jennifer Morrison, no relation to Frank, was a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. She had reviewed my case and agreed to represent me if necessary. Jennifer called me the next morning. "This is pretty clear-cut. They have no legal standing. I'm going to send them a letter explaining that you will not be paying the fines and that any attempt to place a lien on your property will result in a lawsuit for abuse of process and intentional infliction of emotional distress." Will that scare them off? Depends on how reasonable they are. Some HOAs back down when they realize they'll be personally liable. Others double down. Based on what you've told me about Sharon, I'm guessing she'll double down. Jennifer was right. 2 days after she sent the letter, I received a response from the HOA's lawyer. It was combative and dismissive, claiming that the board had full authority to enforce architectural guidelines, and that my shed was in violation regardless of when it was built. "This is actually good news," Jennifer told me when I forwarded her the response. "Their lawyer is either incompetent or they're not being honest with him about the facts. Either way, we have a strong case." We filed a lawsuit in Oakland County Circuit Court, seeking a declaratory judgment that the shed was not in violation, an injunction preventing the HOA from imposing fines or placing a lien, and damages for harassment and emotional distress. The lawsuit got the neighborhood's attention. Several residents reached out to express their support. A few even offered to testify about Sharon's pattern of aggressive enforcement and selective rule application. But Sharon wasn't done. A week after we filed the lawsuit, I got a call from the City of Sterling Heights Building Department. They had received an anonymous complaint about my shed, claiming it wasn't built to code and might be unsafe. I drove down to the building department and spoke with the inspector, a middle-aged man named Robert Torres, who had actually done my original inspection 3 years ago. "Mr. Henderson, I remember your shed. I personally inspected it and it passed with flying colors, but when we get a complaint we have to follow up. I understand. When do you want to come inspect it? I'm free this afternoon if that works for you. Robert came by at 3 o'clock and spent an hour going over every inch of the shed. He checked the foundation, the framing, the electrical connections, the ventilation, everything. Everything looks good, he finally said. Better than most sheds I see, honestly. You did quality work. So no violations, none. I'll document this and close out the complaint. But between you and me, anonymous complaints like this are usually HOA related. Someone's trying to make your life difficult. Yeah, I noticed. That evening, my new security cameras caught something interesting. At 11:47 p.m., Sharon Kimball drove slowly past my house, stopped briefly to take photos of my shed with her phone, then drove away. She repeated this 3 more times over the next week, always late at night. I showed the footage to Jennifer. Is this enough to get a restraining order? Maybe. It's definitely harassment. Let me think about the best approach. Before we could decide on a next step, Sharon made her biggest mistake yet. On a Saturday morning, I was inside working when I heard my generator start up. This was odd because I hadn't turned it on and there was no power outage. I rushed outside to find Sharon standing next to my generator shed with the door open, filming the running generator with her phone. "What are you doing?" I shouted. "That's trespassing." "I'm documenting a noise violation," Sharon said, not even looking embarrassed. "This generator is too loud and it's disturbing the peace. You turned it on. It wasn't running until you started it. I have a right to inspect potential violations." "No, you don't. You have no right to enter my property or touch my equipment. Leave now or I'm calling the police." "Go ahead and call them. I'm performing my duties as HOA president." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "I need police at 1847 Maple Grove Drive. Someone is trespassing on my property and refusing to leave." Sharon's confidence faltered slightly, but she continued filming. 5 minutes later, Officer Martinez arrived. By then, I had pulled up my security footage on my phone, showing Sharon entering my property without permission and turning on my generator. Martinez watched the footage, then turned to Sharon. "Madam, did you enter his property without permission?" "I'm the HOA president. I have authority to inspect for violations." "You have a specific provision in the HOA bylaws that gives you that authority," Sharon hesitated. "The board has enforcement powers." "That's not what I asked." "Show me where it says you can enter private property without permission." Sharon couldn't produce anything. Martinez turned to me. "Do you want to press charges?" I looked at Sharon, seeing her confidence crumble for the first time. "Yes. I want to press charges for trespassing and possibly tampering with my property." Martinez nodded and turned back to Sharon. "Madam, I'm citing you for trespassing. You'll need to appear in court on the date listed on this citation. And I strongly advise you to stay off Mr. Henderson's property in the future." Sharon sputtered protests, but Martinez was professional and firm. After he handed her the citation, Sharon stormed off to her car and drove away. "This might sound unprofessional," Martinez said after she left, "but some people really need to learn that being on an HOA board doesn't make them the law. I appreciate you handling this properly. That security footage was smart. Keep those cameras running." I called Jennifer immediately after Martinez left. "Sharon just gave us exactly what we needed." Jennifer was thrilled. "Trespassing, on camera. This changes everything. I'm going to amend our lawsuit to include this incident." This shows a pattern of harassment that goes beyond just the shed dispute. The amended lawsuit hit Sharon and the HOA like a freight train. Within days, Linda Patterson and Gary Webster both resigned from the board, not wanting to be part of the legal liability. This left Sharon as the only board member, which under the HOA bylaws meant she couldn't make official decisions without a quorum. Frank Morrison called an emergency meeting of the homeowners to elect a new board. The meeting was packed, with over 80% of the neighborhood showing up. The anger wasn't just about my situation anymore. People had started comparing notes and realized that Sharon had been aggressive and unreasonable with multiple residents. One homeowner talked about being fined for having his trash cans visible from the street for an extra hour after pickup. Another had been cited for planting flowers that weren't on the approved list. A third had received a violation notice because her daughter's birthday decorations stayed up for 3 days instead of 2. The pattern was clear. Sharon had been using her position to bully and control the neighborhood, and people were fed up. The vote was unanimous. Sharon was removed from the board, and Frank was elected president along with 2 other reasonable residents. Their first official act was to withdraw the violation notice against my shed and drop the HOA's defense of my lawsuit. But the criminal case against Sharon was still moving forward. The trespassing charge was scheduled for district court, and the prosecutor had added a charge of malicious destruction of property related to the driveway vandalism. You might wonder how they connected Sharon to the vandalism. It turned out that one of my other neighbors, 2 houses down, had a doorbell camera that captured a silver Toyota Camry driving past around the time the vandalism occurred. The car matched Sharon's vehicle, and paint residue found on a can in her garage trash matched the paint used on my driveway. The criminal trial was brief. Sharon's lawyer tried to argue that the trespassing was a misunderstanding and that there was no proof she had vandalized my driveway. But the evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, paint evidence, witness testimony from neighbors who had heard Sharon making threats about my shed. The judge was not sympathetic. "Mrs. Kimball, you held a position of trust in your community. Instead of exercising that trust responsibly, you engaged in a campaign of harassment against a neighbor who had done nothing wrong. You trespassed, you vandalized, and you abused your authority. This court will not tolerate such behavior." Sharon was convicted on both charges. She received a sentence of 90 days in jail, suspended pending 1 year of probation, a $1,000 fine, restitution for the damage to my driveway, and a court order to stay at least 500 feet away from me and my property. The civil lawsuit was settled a month later. The HOA's insurance company paid my legal fees and damages, totaling $15,000. Sharon personally paid an additional $10,000 for the emotional distress and harassment. But the most satisfying outcome was watching my neighborhood return to normal. Frank and the new board repealed Sharon's aggressive architectural guidelines and replaced them with reasonable standards that everyone had input on. They also implemented new rules about board authority and proper procedures for handling violations, ensuring that what happened to me couldn't happen to anyone else. My generator shed still stands in my backyard, doing exactly what it was designed to do. During a power outage last winter, it kept my heat and refrigerator running while several neighbors were without power. I ran extension cords to 3 nearby houses, including Frank's, and we rode out the storm together. The whole experience taught me several valuable lessons. First, documentation is everything. Without those building permits, inspection certificates, and security footage, I might have lost. Second, bullies only have power if people let them get away with it. Once the neighborhood stood together, Sharon's reign of terror ended quickly. Third, sometimes you have to fight back, even when it's exhausting and expensive. About 6 months after everything settled, Sharon and her husband quietly put their house on the market and moved to a different neighborhood in Sterling Heights. I heard through the grapevine that she tried to join their HOA board too, but her criminal record and the publicity from our case made that impossible. Frank sometimes jokes that I'm a neighborhood hero, but I don't see it that way. I was just a guy who built a generator shed, got the proper permits, and didn't want to be pushed around by someone on a power trip. Last month, I got a letter from a homeowner in a different subdivision who was having similar problems with their HOA. They had read about my case in the local news and wanted advice. I spent an hour on the phone with them, walking them through the process of documenting everything, understanding their legal rights, and finding a good lawyer. If my experience helps even one other person stand up to an abusive HOA, then all the stress and hassle was worth it. Home ownership should be about building a life and a community, not about dealing with petty tyrants who think a board position makes them royalty. My generator shed still gets compliments from visitors. It's well built, professional looking, and completely functional. During the summer, I painted it to match my house exactly, not because I had to, but because I wanted it to look nice. That's the thing Sharon never understood. Most people want their homes to look good. They want their neighborhoods to be pleasant. You don't need aggressive enforcement and threats to achieve that. You just need reasonable people treating each other with respect. These days, when I walk my dog around the neighborhood in the evenings, people wave and smile. Kids play in the streets. Neighbors chat over fences about normal things like weather and sports, not about violation notices and fines. It feels like a real community again. The spot where Sharon used to live is now occupied by a young family with 2 kids. They're friendly, considerate, and last week they asked me for advice about building a deck. I helped them research the permit requirements and even gave them the contact information for Robert Torres at the building department. That's how neighborhoods should work. People helping each other, not tearing each other down over trivial nonsense. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had just given in to Sharon's demands and torn down my shed. It would have been the easier path in the short term. No lawyers, no court dates, no stress. But it also would have been wrong. That shed was legal, properly permitted, and hurting nobody. Tearing it down would have been an admission that bullies win if they just push hard enough. I'm glad I fought back. Not just for myself, but for everyone else in the neighborhood who was tired of being pushed around. Change doesn't happen unless someone stands up and says, "Enough is enough." My wife, Rachel, who I haven't mentioned much because she was visiting her sister in California through most of this ordeal, came home right after the trial ended. When I told her everything that had happened, her first reaction was, "You fought an HOA president and won. I'm gone for 3 months and you turn into a legal warrior." She was kidding, but there was truth to it. 3 months earlier, I might have paid the fine just to avoid conflict. But something about Sharon's aggressive tactics and obvious power trip triggered something in me. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was principle, but I wasn't going to let someone force me to destroy something I had built legally and properly. Rachel was actually proud of me, which felt good. She had always been the confrontational one in our relationship, while I tended to avoid conflict. But this situation didn't give me a choice. Sharon made it a fight, and I fought back. The funny thing is, my generator shed has become something of a neighborhood landmark now. People refer to it when giving directions. "Take a left at the generator shed house," they say. What was supposed to be a source of shame and violation is now just part of the neighborhood's character. Last week, Tom Chen from down the street asked if I could help him design a similar shed for his property. He wants backup power too, especially after last winter's outages. I walked him through the whole process, from planning to permits to construction. The difference is, now he doesn't have to worry about the HOA giving him grief. The new board actually encourages homeowners to improve their properties, as long as they follow reasonable guidelines and get proper permits. That's what good HOA leadership looks like. They're there to help maintain property values and resolve disputes, not to act as petty dictators enforcing arbitrary rules. Frank told me recently that membership satisfaction with the HOA has never been higher. They conduct regular surveys now, and homeowners consistently report feeling heard and respected. Several people have even volunteered to serve on committees, something that rarely happened under Sharon's leadership. It's amazing what a difference leadership makes. Same neighborhood, same houses, same people, but a completely different atmosphere. I still have all the documentation from my case stored in a file cabinet in my office. Sometimes I look through it and shake my head at the absurdity of it all. Hundreds of pages of legal documents, dozens of hours of security footage, all because someone decided a legally permitted generator shed was worth destroying a neighbor's peace of mind. But those documents also represent something important. They represent standing up for yourself. They represent the power of evidence and documentation. They represent the fact that bullies can be defeated if you're willing to fight back with facts and the law on your side. I've thought about writing a guide for other homeowners dealing with HOA disputes. Something practical, laying out the steps to take, the laws to know, the documentation to keep. Maybe I will someday. For now, I'm content to help people one-on-one when they reach out. The criminal proceedings against Sharon became public record, which means anyone can look up her conviction. I've heard that several other HOAs in the area now do background checks on board candidates, trying to avoid electing someone with a history of abusing authority. That feels like a positive change coming from a negative situation. My relationship with law enforcement in Sterling Heights improved dramatically through all of this. Officer Martinez and I sometimes chat when I see him around town. He told me that HOA disputes are some of the most frustrating calls they get because usually both sides are convinced they are absolutely right. Having clear documentation and evidence made his job much easier. The building department also uses my case sometimes as an example in their permitting classes. Robert Torres mentioned that they now emphasize to homeowners the importance of keeping permit documentation forever, because you never know when you'll need to prove that something was done legally years ago. All of this from one generator shed. It's almost funny when you think about it. The generator itself has run flawlessly since I installed it. It kicks on automatically whenever we lose power, keeps the essential systems running, and gives us peace of mind during storm season. That's all I wanted when I built the shed 3 years ago. Just a reliable backup power system for my home. I never wanted to become the guy who sued his HOA. I never wanted security cameras all over my property. I never wanted to spend thousands of dollars on lawyers and court costs. But Sharon didn't give me a choice. She escalated at every opportunity, and eventually she crossed lines that had real legal consequences. The thing that still amazes me is how badly she miscalculated. If she had just left me alone, she'd still be HOA president. She'd still have her perfect record. She wouldn't have a criminal conviction. But her need for control and her inability to admit she was wrong led her down a path of increasing aggression until she literally trespassed on my property and committed vandalism. At what point did she think, "This is fine, I'm not doing anything wrong"? When she was spray painting my driveway in the middle of the night, when she was entering my property without permission, when she was trying to enforce rules that didn't exist when my shed was built, I'll never understand that level of self-righteousness. The complete inability to see that you're in the wrong, even when the evidence is overwhelming. But I don't waste much energy thinking about Sharon anymore. She's gone, living somewhere else, hopefully learning from her mistakes, though I doubt it. People like that rarely do. Instead, I focus on the positive changes. Our neighborhood association is functional and reasonable. People feel comfortable improving their homes without fear of arbitrary enforcement. Disputes get resolved through conversation and compromise rather than threats and fines. That's how it should be. That's what I fought for. Not just my shed, but the principle that homeowners have rights and those rights can't be trampled by someone on a power trip. The financial settlement I received covered all my legal costs with some left over. Rachel and I used part of it to take a vacation to Colorado, something we'd been putting off for years. It felt good to get away and decompress after months of stress and conflict. When we came back, the neighborhood felt different, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. Other residents told me they felt the same way. Sharon's departure and the new board's reasonable approach had changed the entire atmosphere. I still maintain my generator shed carefully. I keep it painted, the generator serviced, everything in good working order. Not because I have to, but because I take pride in my property. That was always the disconnect with Sharon. She thought people needed to be threatened and fined into maintaining their homes. In reality, most people naturally want their property to look good. They just need to be left alone to do it their way. The whole experience taught me a lot about standing up for yourself, even when it's hard. Even when it would be easier to just give in. Because giving in to bullies doesn't make them go away. It just encourages them to bully someone else. I think about the other residents Sharon was harassing. The ones with the trash cans and the flowers and the birthday decorations. If I hadn't fought back, she would have just continued targeting them. By standing up to her, I inadvertently protected everyone else too. That's not heroic. That's just doing the right thing when the right thing is hard. My generator shed stands as a testament to that. To following the rules, documenting everything, and refusing to be pushed around by someone who thinks authority means they can ignore facts and laws. 3 years later, after building it properly and getting all the right permits, it's still there, still functional, still legal. And absolutely nobody cares except to ask me for advice on building their own. That's exactly how it should be.